thank you so much. And it's an absolute pleasure to be here. And hard act to follow with Angela and Sophie and their brilliant vision in empowering women and through the business arm. My story is more about how to do that for you as a woman, and at that very deep journey of knowing and understanding yourself. But how I sort of got to that point where I needed to go on that journey myself is the story that I want to share with you today. And it really is that the message is one that I hope you will take away, and I'll get to that as I go through my story. So back in 2010, I'd reached a point in my marriage where I felt I had three options. The first was to stab my husband. And I know that sounds incredibly violent, but that was the image that would keep coming to my mind as I would see him just lying there on the recliner while I'm, struggling to get everything done. The next was to leave him because, and sort of go through that process of uncoupling us and our whole family, not to mention the financial impact on all of us. And I really didn't want to go down that option. And the third was to do something else. But at that point, I didn't know what that something else would look like. And it was just that sort of, I'd got to that point after the soul sucking years and the emotional pain building up over time. And I'd just become more and more disillusioned in our relationship. So you see, when my hubby and I first got together, he had a 5-year-old son. And because my husband felt so guilty about leaving his wife, he agreed that even though we both worked full time, we would have his son with us every weekend, which in theory is fine, except that his son didn't like me. And he's the first person in my life that openly didn't like me, and that I wasn't able to win around with my highly developed people-pleasing skills that I still had at that point. And what that meant was every weekend was an absolute challenge. And as my stepson grew, that challenge only increased. And I felt like I was just, walking on eggshells in my own home. The environment when my stepson there was very toxic. And my husband, in order to sort of, because of the guilt he was feeling, really loved to negotiate and continue to try and appease my stepson and keep him happy. But I felt that appeasement was at my expense. And I continued to feel alone within our relationship. And we ended up with this triangle of, my hubby trying to sort of work with the two of us, and we just couldn't work a way around. And he thought that, by doing nothing, somehow it would resolve. And of course, that wasn't the case. In about 2000, my hubby and I had our first child, a daughter, followed shortly by a son. And it was about this time that my stepson and his mother moved away to rural Victoria. We live in Melbourne. So then came to 2010, and my stepson wants to come to university in Melbourne. And so conversations start about where he will live. And of course, my husband wants him to live with us full time. And I knew I needed to be okay with that because he was his son. But I also knew for my own sake that it couldn't be on the same terms and conditions that had been there through all of those weekends, because I just didn't feel that we as a couple would survive, and that the environment for, our kids and our home in general would just be horrible and hostile. So I tried to have those conversations with my hubby, and he kept saying, look, the arrangements haven't been put in place yet, still working things out. But what happened was my stepson ended up moving in full time by stealth with no discussion or input from me. And it was at that point that I just thought, I've lost my voice in my own home. Like, what I feel, what I think, what's important to me is just not being considered. And that was sort of that sticking point of, this can't go on. which brings me back to that, those 3 points that I started with. Do I stab him? Do I leave him? Or do I do something else? And I was just feeling like I had lost the woman that I was. So professionally, I was still doing really well. But, at home, I felt like I was a shadow of my former self. And I just wondered, where did I go after all those years of being a wife and a mother? And so I thought maybe the place to start is to go on that journey back to me, to go on that learning and growth journey, to really know and understand what makes me tick. So the first thing I did was go on a 10-day retreat where I learned, what I like about myself, what I don't like, why some things upset me and others don't, what my values were, and recognizing that there's significant difference between what I was valuing and what my husband valued, but also that, as a couple, it's okay to have different values as long as there is some connection points and some things that you do share. But I learned about my beliefs in particular of being, what I believed about being a wife and a mother and a stepmother, and what I believed about money and my appearance, and all of those things that make up the lenses through which I was viewing the world, and got present to the fact that lots of that was created through my experience growing up as the 8th child in a family of 11. I had no idea how to be in my feminine energy. I have got 6 older brothers, so of course I had no idea how to operate in that energy and bring that response forward in my husband. So just so many things that I got present to where I was getting in my own way. So through that journey, I came back full of hope for us, and it took a long time, but because I had done the work on myself, essentially we were able to recalibrate our relationship, and in a way that we are now better, bigger, stronger than ever. And the thing for me was, what I most took from that event, and the thing that I want to share with you, is that that basically we are all responsible for our own lives. There is no one responsible for your happiness or your experience of life except for you. There's no one going to come in and rescue you. You actually have to rescue yourself and be a stand for who you are. And this meant that not only did I need to learn how to know, love, and accept all of who I was, but I also needed to do the same for my husband. Like, it was at that event that I heard the saying for the first time by Dr. John Demartini, that all any of us really wants is to love and be loved, and to be known, loved, and got for the truth of who we are. And those words, when I first heard them, I just had tears dripping down my face, because that was all I wanted. I just wanted my husband to love me for me. But what I realized was I wasn't loving him for him. He and I were very different people, or are very different people. I'm an extrovert. He's an introvert. He's quite opinionated and judgmental. I'm very open-minded. I love adventure and travel. He hadn't left Australia since he arrived here from Sri Lanka 10 years ago. And we have very different parenting styles. And what I knew I'd been doing was I had been blaming him for basically thinking it was his fault that our marriage wasn't working, and it was his fault that our kids were not behaving properly. And basically, I was making him wrong for not being more like me. I don't know if any of you can relate to that, but I needed to apply the same rules to him that I wanted him to apply to me. I needed to stop making him wrong for who he was, and accept and love him for the truth of who he was. So these shifts really profoundly shifted our relationship, and I got to the point where I wanted to where I wanted to share what I had learned and the impact of this experience for me with other women. And so I approached my mentor at the time to see if I could work with her. And thankfully she said yes. And over the next 6 years, taught me and shared with me her tools and strategies, her frameworks. And, over those 6 years, I was a senior coach and mentor in her business. And we co-facilitated lots of events and retreats together. But in 2019, I decided it was time for me to go my own way and create the program that I wished had been available to me back when I needed it most, and for me to work with the women whose stories most resonate with my own. So the end of last year, I created the Create a Life to Love program, and I'm just so blown away by the difference it's making for the women that I work with, and the changes they're making in their own lives and their relationships as they actually start to create what it is they want, knowing that they've now got the tools and strategies for life that will allow them to navigate their lives with ease and grace. So my key message is, it's up to you to create what it is that you want in your life, and that nobody else can do that for you. Now, I do want to end by just acknowledging the role my stepson has played in that, and let you know that he's now a grown man and our relationship is very amicable. But I'm so full of gratitude for him, because he was actually the catalyst for me going on this learning and growth journey for myself, and that now allows me to lead and guide other women in their own growth journey. So thank you so much for listening to me and being part of this morning.